All right, everybody. We are Sunday night again. I think it's the 27th of September. Oh, no, the 18th of October. I'm sorry. We were picking at Jimmy. We had a little mix-up on the date there, so we are right now. It's October 18th.
And leave it to a female to point that out. All of us males, we didn't catch it at all.
None of us even noticed it. So for the last...
Julie and Haley both said, is it still the 27th for you? When's today going to change?
For the last 6 weeks, it's been September 27th. But no, here we are. Oh,
it's
man,
almost October 27th.
That's right. But anyway, we're back here in the room. Got great service Wednesday night. We had a big crowd, even more people this Wednesday.
Yes, we did.
People are bringing people to church, which that's amazing. We're proud of you guys. We're glad to be back. We're having a great time. So don't forget Wednesday night. I'll say it now. We'll say it again at the end. Wednesday night, 7 o'clock.
Haunted houses.
Haunted houses still. We're doing the same series. So be here. Bring somebody with you. Doesn't go to church. Bring somebody that goes to a different church. That if they're not having church, somebody, anybody.
Right. That's right.
Bring them on in. We'll be happy to have somebody a week or the next 6 months, whatever it takes. But tonight we're going to continue on making history. This is the last in this series.
Yeah,
that
I'm
comes
a little
with
sad
the series.
about this too.
Me and Neil were talking earlier that this has been a really good one. Because so many people fall into this category of
that's exactly right.
Making history when you're not the front runner, and we've talked about it over and over. We're back again with Paul, and people that supported Paul and went on with Paul's ministry. So
let me ask you this, your take, and I do this because this is I have a personal opinion about this, and I've actually shared it one time before, but I honestly think the problem with this of not placing value on the unsung hero with this has not come from the world. It's come from the church.
Absolutely.
Because we'll look at the preacher or the youth pastor or the children's pastor and say, ooh, they somebody. Or we'll look at the soloist with the choir oh, they're somebody. Or we'll look at the Sunday school teacher that their Sunday school's oh, they somebody. And we place value on that. And I think sometimes we miss, let me just stop right there. You tell me. Give me your thoughts. What?
Definitely, and I was thinking about this the last couple of weeks. We've been going through this, and I was thinking about things, and I was looking at church statistics. I like numbers. I like statistics.
Right.
I like seeing things, and I was looking at, and I'm gonna pull these up real quick, and I was thinking about the unsung heroes of churches and how much, because we get these people where you look at Paul, and Paul was preaching to. Started the church basically, and so when Paul came into town, there was a crowd. You know what I'm saying? There was you got to imagine.
Right.
I mean, this is purely speculation on my part, but I can't imagine Paul coming into these towns, and he's going into Corinth tonight, and we're in Acts chapter 18. He's going into Corinth. He says
10 people show up.
I mean, I can't imagine. There's a crowd there. Yeah. But then when he's gone, there's these people that were on these things that were support staff, and they're preaching to the church every day. And these churches, just the average size of church would blow your mind. Of the 59% of churches in America have less than 99 members.
Wow.
That's a huge number.
Wow.
So and I think of Bethesda in that 1,000 people range.
That's right.
And
you say that. I just heard this. I just heard this just a few months ago. The average church attendance for a Church of God in South Carolina is like 80.
Yeah.
A little over 80.
That's right.
But around 80. And there's some that's like, that's not true. Yeah, because y'all run 1,000. You looking at Bethesda, but you're not looking at every little church that's in this area that runs
10.
It's exactly right.
But and so that really blew my mind because I was thinking Bethesda is because I came from a church with 10,000 members.
Right. That's right.
And some churches back in Cleveland, some Church of God churches back in Cleveland and Chattanooga and Idlewild, they running 5, 6, 8,000 people on Sunday morning.
Kevin Wallace, I don't know what he's running.
I mean, however
he got
many,
2 locations.
That's right. So, all this stuff, and then all these churches that have multiple locations, and they running 10,000 people on a Sunday morning, and I'm thinking, man, Bethesda, I don't know, average size church. I'm thinking that's an average size church. When you look at this, from around 1,000 members puts you in the top 7% of all churches in America.
Great day.
So,
but you know what I'm finding in having some conversations with different people, and I don't I'm be careful when I say this, especially being online. But
That's right.
I'm not the one that lives in the bubble. We got a lot of folk live in the bubble.
That's right.
In fact, I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of Church of God folk live in that bubble,
Absolutely.
and all they're worried about is their name, their prominence, their
That's
political status, their thing with the Church of God. And I'm under the mentality of bump that. I don't do that. I love Church of God. But what I'm saying is I want to know what First Baptist is doing downtown. I want to know what Shane's doing at Harmony, what Alan's doing at Westside. What, we meet youth pastors, we meet all the time, and we talk about this stuff. And I love that perspective. And here, out of mega churches, the hottest new staff position that in fact, there's been two guys that have placed value. Both of these were Church of God guys, but Kevin Wallace and Jensen Franklin both placed value on this new staff position. And they hire an outreach pastor that they said we'll pay more for an outreach pastor than we will a youth pastor,
Absolutely.
a children's pastor, a music pastor, or even an associate pastor.
Right.
Because what the outreach pastor does is in charge of all volunteers for the church. So if I need this room set up, he has a crew that's together, and I'm thinking, great day. Wow. Media pastors.
Pastor Al Sims, can we get an outreach pastor? No, I'm just kidding. No, seriously. But
Media pastors.
That's right. But no, I mean, and so the numbers, those percentages are crazy. But you look at the numbers, and this is what really got me was, okay, Paul's preaching if Paul starts a church, he's got the mega church.
That's exactly right.
He's got 10,000 members.
Yep.
He's got all this stuff. If you took just the churches over 1,000 members, there's a total of about 12 million people in the U.S., weekly worshipers that go to a church over 1,000 people. So 12 million people. If you take a church under 500 people, counting from 500 down, that's about 38 million people go to those churches every Sunday morning. So
great day.
And that's what really got me was thinking, okay, so people want to be involved and they want to be a part of a church, and you want to reach, and if you want to preach,
right,
and you want to be a youth minister,
right,
and you want to do all this stuff,
right,
that's fine and dandy. But guess where you're better served? At a church with 100 people.
Yep.
Because there's more people going to those size churches than there's people even going to Bethesda. And like you said, that the outreach and this is what really has tied all this thing back together. And to go back to your question is the more the importance. You've got to teach Paul, the life of Paul. You've got to teach the 12 disciples. You've got to teach the life of Jesus. You've got to do these sermons, but really and truly, if you want to reach the people, the kids that are in here every day, and if you want to reach the people that are sitting in a Sunday morning service, preach about these people that are unheard of.
Absolutely.
Because that's what those people are.
Yep.
There's no way in a 100-person church. I mean, we're 1,000-member church, and we've got 5 staff members, 4 or 5
full
staff
time.
Well, not full time, but I'm saying like actual
part-time,
paid part-time, full-time staff.
3,
5?
4, 5.
5. So think of a church with 100 people. You know how many full-time staff members they got? Probably 0 full-time.
Yeah.
Because the preacher's probably working a job Monday through Friday, and then he's preaching on Sunday.
Right. And I'll tell you one struggle that we have here, just to be vulnerable, is with the full-time staff members, we only have 3.
Yeah.
And all 3 of us have they're completely different skill sets.
That's right.
But all 3 of us have one negative thing that we all share in common, and it's we're workaholics.
Yeah.
All 3 of us. We actually have a senior pastor that'll work, and that's a rare thing.
That's right.
I mean, it ain't nothing for a men's ministry night that you don't see your pastor in this room. You know why? Because Al Sims is in the kitchen back there washing dishes.
That's right.
He don't tell somebody else to do something. We are workaholics, and that's scary in itself. But you know what's amazing is there's been 4 weeks of this making history thing. 3 of them had to do with people that supported and undergirded Paul.
Yeah.
And I mean, we look at this, and we're going to tap into this word discipleship.
That's right.
But I think this is what sustains big churches.
Absolutely.
Is not the big church. It's the discipleship when you come out the main sanctuary.
Absolutely.
And my mom blasted me. I've been in ministry now, going on my 22nd year. But when I just started good, and we were at the old church, we were running 300. At best. We moved, and in transition, having service at Patriot Hall, we grew, which was weird.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, we ain't even got a church home. How are we growing?
Well,
you know,
that shows you were doing the right thing.
Yeah, and then we come in here, and then, well, we were there, and then on Wednesday night, we were meeting at Alice Drive Middle School. Mm-hmm. So we were having our Wednesday night services, and I'm sitting in a gym with 20 kids. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden, there's 40 kids. You're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. But I looked at the discipleship that was going on, because at Alice Drive, it wasn't nothing to walk down the hall, and you would see people in classrooms.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, this is great. And my mom told me then, she said, I don't like a big church. She said, now she loved Pastor Sims, which is why, you know, there was too many licensed preachers in my family to preach her funeral, but he had a part in it, not just because he was the pastor of this church, but because my mom loves Al Sims.
Right.
She loved him because it's too easy to pick on, and he'd fire back. So they had that kind of relationship. Right. You know, that's why she'd say, do you feel good enough getting a paycheck today? Because I put my tithe in there, and I don't know if I've seen you do enough to get your, you know, that kind of stuff they would pick.
Right.
But Mama would tell you, I'm not a fan of Bethesda, the church. But now, my mom will tell you, best church she has ever been a part of is in that room right there. Because her Sunday school class with Regina Owens, the Life Spring Sunday school class, was my mama's church. And she would tell you that. This is my personal body of Christ.
Right.
I go into the sanctuary because my son's here. I love my pastor. And I like church, but this is my discipleship group. And that's what she was valued the most, in all honesty. In fact, she would say, we got to go out of town, but I'm not missing Sunday school.
Right.
We might miss a service.
That's right. and I think through all this, and we're talking about it earlier, we've talked about it multiple times on these Sunday night things. We've talked about it, me and you out eating lunch. We've talked about it hundreds of times, and it's almost like it's kind of, these have just like reinforced the kind of conviction of the church as a whole. Discipleship is gone.
You're right.
And growing up as a kid in church, you growing up as a kid through church, you may not have been whatever, but you were in church, you knew what church,
exactly
you saw
right.
church. We had discipleship meetings, we had discipleship classes, we had, you know, every night, and I understand schedules and times and stuff like that have changed, and used to, you know, everybody got out of work and everybody got off work early on Wednesdays, and we got out of football practice early on Wednesdays so we could make it to church.
Church used to be a community priority.
That's right. And it's not anymore, and I understand that, and this is not a bash on the church.
Oh, no.
We as a church have put the focus on Paul and taken it off of these people we've been talking about. Lydia,
Priscilla and
Aquila,
which sounds like a rock group to me.
Priscilla and Aquila, with, you know, and we're going to talk about Apollos later, and we've taken it off of those people and put the emphasis on Paul. We've taken it off of, hey, I'm going to teach a discipleship class. There might only be 5 people in there.
That's right.
But we're gonna really study the Word, and we're really going to learn how to deal with everyday situations too. Man, as long as I'm going to church on Sunday morning, that's good enough right now.
Right.
You know, and I'm guilty of that. You know, I'm guilty of saying, hey, we made it church on Sunday morning, I'm good for the week.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying? And that kind of thing. But as a church, we've had to make cuts as churches. We've had to make cuts as this and say, well, we were doing discipleship class, but we were having one person come, and while that one person is important, we can't run a whole church and have one person come. We've got to try to
here.
Get. That's right.
You know what it costs to cut these lights on?
I'm sure.
Woo!
You know, but I'm saying that kind of thing, and so this is where the discipleship. This is what we're talking about tonight. Disciplship of churches and people that were involved in discipleship. Those are the true heroes of the Bible.
That's exactly right.
And I mean, everybody loves, when you watch a movie, everybody loves the main character, the hero. But there's always, we talked about Batman and Alfred last week, Batman and Robin and Alfred.
Yep.
And then, but there's always somebody behind the scenes.
That's right.
All these like natural disaster movies and stuff, there's always some nerd guy that figures something out on the computer that the hero takes the information and wins, you know, saves the day with that information. So there's always somebody behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, you know, I thought today with Lydia and now with Aquila and Priscilla, how many times you think Paul was on the verge of quitting?
Oh,
I mean, because you know good and well. In fact, you can see it in some of his writings. And I've had enough. I'm tired even unto death.
Yeah.
You know, this is getting old. You know, I heard a guy say one time, every time Paul would go to a new city, the first place he went and looked at was the jail, because that's where he was going to wind up. You know, at what point do you think? And I mean, you know, there's always in our life where we're like, I've had enough. But I got 2 texts today, and I'm just going to call them out. This is totally random, but just wanted to let you know you've been on my heart for the past couple of days. Just wanted to let you know I love you and I'm praying for you in the van. Rachel Elliott, you have no idea the personal stuff that going through. Now, when she was here, before she backslid and left me and went to Lee, but I'm just playing. But when she was here, you know, her and Haley was thick as thieves. Right. You know, so Rachel was kind of like family. So she's been at my house. Haley's been to her house, that kind of stuff. And so she knew a lot about our personal life or whatever. But, you know, being at Lee, 7 hours from here, or unless your dad's driving 5. That's right. So she don't know. We're not, she don't see it daily.
That's right.
So I'm like, wow, what if I'm on the verge? Not saying I'm Paul, but what if I'm on the verge? You get that. And then a few minutes later, David Branson Jr.
Yeah.
You know, hey, hold on, where's the first one? How you holding up? Said, I'm alive. That's about the extent right now. Said, I know what you mean. Do you have a solid support system?
Yeah.
Y'all, this is one of my former teens.
Yeah.
That hated my guts for a little while because I knew stuff and, you know, I called him out.
That's right.
That now says, hey, sounds great. Looking forward to it. Can't wait for you to call me. I love you back. And I'm like, these are the things. Aquila and Priscilla.
Yeah.
What if, I'm not saying they were, but what if this is Paul's last, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm completely done. In walks them.
You don't know how many times preachers and good preachers, I mean, there's always these crazy preachers that are in their own world and doing all this kind of stuff. There's no telling, but I'm talking about, go to Jensen Franklin and ask him, Jensen, if you had the opportunity to sit down with him and say, I want you to be 100% honest with me, how many times in your life have you thought about walking away from ministry?
Yep.
It would blow your mind.
Yep.
How many preachers walk away every day?
That's right.
I had a youth minister that was great, and when I was going through high school, and we had a big transition in our church, and he came in at a good time, and he grew the youth group and did things with the youth group, and he left and went to another church, and things got different, and he walked away. And I think to myself, how many times could I have done something to encourage him?
Right. Yeah.
And how many times could other people have done something to encourage him? Or how many times has Jensen Franklin said, you know what, Lord, man, I've had enough. And then walks somebody and says, you don't know what you've meant to my life.
Exactly.
If it wasn't for you, I would be, you know, and then
it's funny you say this, because 2 of my friends that were youth pastors just last week are not youth pastors now.
Yeah.
And I ain't gonna lie. I actually thought the last week, I'm like, could I have done something?
Yeah.
Should I have? Because I'm going to tell you this. I'm really going to throw my problems out there. I actually had one of them cross my mind. I was like, man, I need to text him. And I didn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm thinking, what if it would have been that moment, you know, that I text him, is like, oh, wait, what am I doing? Hold on, I need to respond to Neil.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I mean, I'm not saying it could have been, and I'm not saying I missed it, but what if I was?
That's right. And I think as a church in whole, and as, you know, leaders in churches, we've kind of dropped the ball on teaching people how to do that.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you're talking about here in Acts 18 verses 1 through 4, and then Acts 18 verses 18 through 20.
In fact, let me encourage you right now. You need to read this whole chapter.
Yes, read the whole chapter.
Read the whole chapter.
These are the 2 sections.
Acts chapter 18. Read it.
But basically, what's happening here is Paul's leaving Athens. He's going to Corinth. He's found a family, and it says a certain Jew named Aquila.
Yep.
And it's basically a Jewish couple, Aquila and Priscilla. They had both had to flee their cities because Claudius that had banished the Jews from Rome. All this stuff, they had banished all the Jews out, which is a common thread in the Bible. I don't know if you've noticed that or not. If you haven't,
talk about racism.
That's right. So I mean, so anyway, they were, Paul was a tent maker. They were tent makers, so they instantly had a connection right off the bat. But and basically, it's implied in this passage that they were already believers, and so they were church members sitting in a church.
That's right.
But they were learning how to be disciples.
Right.
And that kind of thing, and just so as you go through, they worked with Paul. They get with Paul. They work with him. They support his ministry. They stay busy preaching. They're preaching. They're teaching. They're working with Paul. All this kind of stuff. So here he is coming through here. Well, again, obviously Paul gets arrested again. I mean, it's another reoccurring theme in the Bible.
Right.
Paul's constantly, like you said, he had to check the jail out.
This just jumped out at me too. There's a lot of times that a preacher says, "Well, I'm pastoring a church." That's all. We should be patterning after Paul. I mean, Jesus first. Don't get me wrong, but we should be patterning a lot after Paul. Paul was bivocational.
That's right.
This joker had to make tents to support his own ministry.
That's right. And going. That's what I'm saying. As we were reading through this, and I saw these statistics on these churches. Most churches have bivocational pastors. Mm-hmm. When you break it down, when 60% of churches have under 100 members, I promise you, a 100-member church is not supporting a full-time pastor.
No, they can't.
There's no way they can.
I think, to be honest with you, it is very, very sad and very dangerous, because I've heard comments made about, they're not really, they're bivocational. Yeah. Like that's a slam on somebody. And that should not be.
No, they're actually, one, they're what the majority of pastors are.
Right.
And two,
in fact, we should have more respect for the bivocational person.
because they work at 2 full-time jobs.
You ain't joking. That's exactly right.
I mean, we like to pick and not pick it out. I mean, we pick at you,
Yeah, only work Sundays
and Wednesdays, that kind of stuff. But being a pastor is especially as your church gets bigger, and that's why bigger churches can afford to pay, and they have to afford to pay pastors, because it is a full-time job. And I'm not saying if you got a small church,
especially when you pastor, and pastor sends pastors.
That's right. If you preach on Sunday mornings, that's one thing. But I'm talking about being a pastor.
That's right.
And Paul was a pastor.
Yeah.
Paul was not going from city to city preaching to people, preaching to crowds, doing these evangel. He preached the gospel. And he pastored people. He took into these people, Aquila, Priscilla, Lydia.
Right.
He took into people like that and said, one of these days I'm gonna be gone, so I'm gonna teach you how to pastor people.
Right.
And I think,
here we go, found it. Like in verse 21, I must by all means keep this coming feast, but I will return again to you, God willing. Yeah. See, he wanted to come back. He wanted the connection with people, not just the church part.
And so, as Paul gets arrested again, of course, Aquila and Priscilla, they remain there as Paul, like you said in verse 21, he has to move on. He basically gets arrested, and they say, "We're going to let you out of jail, but you got to get out of town.
You got to get out of here."
So he knows, and so he moves on, but hoping that God will allow him to sing. But Aquila and Priscilla, as he leaves, they encounter a man named Apollos. He was a smart guy. He was probably, it says he knew the scriptures, he knew the Messiah, but he didn't have the whole story.
Right.
He knew the work of John the Baptist. Likely he preached that the Messiah had already come. A lot of Jews in that time thought that John the Baptist was actually the Messiah.
That's exactly right. That's right.
So they, he was thinking of that. So he had little knowledge of Jesus.
Right.
But he was smart. He probably, and being a smart, educated person back then, you were probably looked at higher.
That's right.
Class.
Probably incredible communicator.
That's right. He was a smart man, so he had people that would look at him and go to him for answers and do that kind of stuff. So that being said, Aquila and Priscilla took him aside and taught him.
Right.
That's where the discipleship comes in, and that's where.
Which I love that whole little part.
That's right. I mean, as churches taking it back to taking it back. Your job as a youth pastor is not to, it's to preach to youth. is the general basic, and if you take it down in its basic forms, you're a youth pastor. You pastor youth, young age, middle school to college age kids.
Right.
But your goal, and I can confidently say this because I know you, your goal is not to sit here and say, I'm going to preach the fire down on these youth, and we're going to take this. We got 50 kids here Wednesday night because we're coming off a pandemic. You wait, in a year we're going to have 200 kids in here, and I'm going to be preaching sermons, and they're going to be saying, man, we got to go hear Neil preach because Neil can preach and Darren can do this. But not that you can't preach, I don't want to say it, but your goal is to take these kids that are sitting in here and say, okay, I'm going to give you the information to take to your school.
Absolutely.
To take to your college, to take to your family, to take to your friends, to become disciples of Christ. That's the ultimate goal, is to say, I'm going to give you the tools to make it in a day-to-day basis. And that's where these Aquila and Priscilla were taking the tools that Paul had given them.
Right.
And they were teaching them to Apollos. And that sounds that was one person. But that's what they did. They preached, and they stayed back, and basically Paul taught them how to preach the church when he left, so when he came back, the church would still be going.
Right. We ate lunch with Eric Rosdale, and it was funny because we were talking about different churches and that kind of stuff, whatever, about vision statements and purposes and all that stuff, and everybody has one, and, the more catchy the lingo, the better it is, whatever. And I was like, you know what, though, what's amazing to me is every single church, I don't care how you phrase it, I don't care what you put in, basically there's only two things that we need to do. And that is to help with the salvation of souls and to love people. It's not about sermons. It's not about programs. It's not about cool youth rooms. It's not about anything other than salvation and loving people. Absolutely. Now, all this helps draw people in for salvation, so you can love them. But you know what, Eric, I'm going to be honest with you. My self-fulfillment does not come in giving a sermon. My self-fulfillment comes when I'm blessed to be able to be a part of the Sumter High football team this year. Well, actually, Sumter High, period. I'm the FCA guy at Sumter High. But to stand on the sideline, and when a kid says, man, I need to get back to your church. He visited a couple times. I'm like, yeah, what's it going to take? Now, it's his name's Chris Ramirez, but he's a beast.
That's right.
And, and his thing is, I said, well, what? He wrestles. I mean, he's an incredible wrestler. He's a good football player, but he's an incredible wrestler. So when I said, what's it going to take for you to get you back? He said, you beat me in wrestling. I was like, well, that ain't going to happen. So I guess I'm just going to have to, but I'm looking, and then, it opens up this dialogue with us.
That's right.
And I'm thinking, why did he just ask me out the blue about this?
Yeah.
There's a football game. Well, it was St. James. I think the score at that point was already like 38-7, so it was no big deal. Right. But I'm thinking, he didn't ask me about church and Jesus and getting back to church because of my great preaching. He didn't ask me because we got air hockey table, pool table, foosball table, ping pong, 9 square. He didn't ask me because of that. He asked me because there was a connection on the sideline, the personal relationship. And I mean, I think this is with Priscilla and Aquila, I declare it still sounds like a 70s rock group. Right. They're going to Apollo. It says they pulled him to the side and taught, guided, and encouraged him to say, look, you're incredible, but look at how much further you could go when you realize the full gospel part.
That's right. And it goes on to say they basically were instrumental in Apollo's growth. And you say, well, why is that significant? Well, if you go on, Apollo goes on to become one of the most powerful teachers,
that's exactly right,
preachers, and have one of the biggest ministries in Corinth at that time.
Right.
So, we were talking about this other night, and it brought it back up through this was, can you imagine the guy that discipled Billy Graham? Not that Apollo was, he may have been, I don't know what, we don't know the full details, but he may have been the Billy Graham of that era.
Right.
But he became that because Aquila and Priscilla took the time to pull him aside and disciple him and help him grow spiritually.
Right.
So somewhere down the line, and as far as I can remember the story, I think it was in some kind of old country tent revival that Billy Graham was actually convicted and saved. And I promise you, back in the day, there
Hot Illustrations. It's a thing that was put out by youth specialists that has like a bunch of little stories. In that, they recorded that there was a Sunday school teacher that went and led a shoe salesman that was a part of his Sunday school that led him to the Lord, who, it was like a chain of events.
That's right.
Who led Billy Sunday, who led who led D.L. Moody, and it went on down to all of a sudden this preacher's holding a tent revival in North Carolina, and this kid, 16-year-old kid, gets saved, which all started from a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah.
So Billy Graham, through the chain of events, led to the Lord by a Sunday school teacher.
You would think, okay, Billy Graham
and a shoe salesman.
Billy Graham, he had to be led to the Lord by
Jesus himself,
the major preacher of the time, and he was probably in a 10,000 people church,
right.
and they were like you said, it went down the line, and even though it went down the line, that man. I promise you, the tent revival in North Carolina, there wasn't more than 50 people.
No, that's right. That's right.
If you've ever been to a tent revival, which most of the young people have never been to a good old-fashioned tent revival, there ain't there's not a whole lot of people there, and two, it can get kind of crazy at times too. But that guy discipled and spoke something through God that spoke to Billy Graham that and then somebody's. Because Billy Graham didn't just go from 16 and say, sign me up, I'm ready to have 80,000 people in the stadium out there. You know what I'm saying? So
I'm ready now.
Somebody discipled him along the way from 16 to whenever he started preaching it. And I promise you, when he started, he didn't walk into the L.A. Coliseum and say, put me down for 100,000, they're going to be here in a few weeks. No, he started and somebody discipled him and took the time to pull him apart. And I would, one day I would love to know how that all happened.
Ooh, you ain't joking.
But there was a lot of insignificant people at the time that poured into somebody like Billy Graham that became the greatest preacher of our millennium.
Absolutely.
And so, I don't know if this was, like I said, I don't know if Apollo was the Billy Graham of that time, but Aquila and Priscilla took the time to sit down and say, we see something in you. We want you to do great.
Right.
We want you to do something great, and you can, but we're going to help you, and we're going to disciple you.
But right there, we see something great in you. We don't have a lot anymore, and I'm guilty too, to where our first thought is to see the something in somebody. We just automatically say, "Oh, that's a bad kid right there."
Yeah, I'm guilty of that.
It would have been easy to say, "Man, all Apollos does is preach about John the Baptist."
He don't even know what he's talking about.
Yeah, he don't have a clue.
I wouldn't waste my time going over there and even
exactly right.
That kind of thing. And so, but as you go through here, we talk about these. You got Aquila and Priscilla. Then think about people that are like the power couples of today's time in a secular sense.
The first one jumps out is Kim and Kanye.
Kim and Kanye.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, millions of people.
Which I think I said, was it last week I said that? By the way, with everybody that's running, if Kanye pops back up, in fact, is it true he just won Kentucky?
I don't even know.
If he pops back up, I might vote for Kanye.
Beyonce and Jay-Z, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Those people that are in the news, and you hear about it, and you hear about these people, but they've influenced thousands of people to have surgeries and do crazy things and buy these crazy clothes that have. I mean, I know I'm old fuddy-duddy when it comes to fashion.
Me too.
You can thank Richard Burnett for that. The man's got like 50 white shirts and 50 blue shirts and like 50 khakis and 50 navy pants. And that's his whole closet. So I understand I'm not on the up and up of fashion, but I'm telling you, some of the stuff that they peddle to these people, I'm like, you obviously don't have a mirror in your house if you're walking out looking like that.
Was there not a show, and I think it might have been on MTV, where it was like people would get surgery to look like certain celebrities, certain stars or something like that?
Like,
I mean, you're spending money and going through pain and to look like somebody else.
I mean, that people spend just buying their products. I mean, they literally have become billionaires for doing nothing but peddling products to people.
Yeah.
And that's how much influence they have. And Aquila and Priscilla, obviously, most of y'all listening tonight, or most of you coming back and watching later, have probably never even heard of them.
Right. That's right.
But yet they were so influential in Apollo's life, and Paul. They were. I'll tell you, if you think about all the journeys that Paul had, if Paul and Jesus, or Paul and when God spoke the word through Paul, if they thought it good enough to put you in their story,
absolutely,
you had to be some kind of.
That's right.
Because
yeah,
I mean, you think about all the people that Paul ran into through his ministry, and you think about all the people that that were around that time and that were doing things like this, but they thought it good enough to put this story in the Bible.
Right.
I mean, if you make I mean, it's like, they put out these who's who of whatever, and top 40 under 40 of Sumter County and all this stuff. And we've had some people from our church
that's right.
And I know some people, and that's great. I mean, they're great people and they deserve it. But I'm saying, if you made the Bible,
a little bit different in the Sumter County.
You got it going on. I mean, so these people were good enough and thought of enough that they were put in the Bible.
I love this that was put in the series. Aquila and Priscilla are a biblical power couple. They show us that we don't have to be known throughout the world to have a big influence. When we invest in meaningful relationships, one person at a time, our lives can have a humongous impact.
Yeah.
And I thought about this. I thought about the influence that you can have and the things that you can do. And you don't know when I think about this often, standing on that sideline on Friday nights, have no idea where some of these kids are going to be in 5 years, 10 years. Some are getting great chances. Then I thought about this. Deshaun, we still praying for you, buddy, but Deshaun McKnight rolls his ankle, and here he is. He's signed with Appalachian State, but he rolls his ankle, and you're like, could he lose everything? How would that impact him? And then you stand there for a moment, and you're like, this is beyond football right now.
That's right.
First of all, getting hurt in a game where you won 57, woo! But at the same time, I'm thinking, this is bigger than football. I want him to know that I'm praying for him.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I'm worried about you. I'm not worried about winning this game. This game's over. But you, what could this change the whole course of your thing? And then, have I made an impact enough? When these kids walk out of the doors of this school for the last time, I hope somewhere they remember. I remember that talk that you did. Marcus Lane posted not long. Hey man, thank you about the thermometer and the thermostat. Great life lesson on his Facebook. And I'm like, wow. And it's not for this. It's for, I hope it got through, that it makes a difference in your life. And I mean, we don't know. Apollos could have, they had to pull him aside. Could he have gone the rest of the time? Who would have missed their chance at salvation or missed their connection to the church or missed a discipling moment had Apollos not been instructed by Priscilla and Aquila?
Yeah.
You don't know. You don't ever know.
Well, this next, tying all that back in, this next little section, and as I was reading over it, it really got me thinking of some past stuff, but we like to talk about sports. Sports, you got obviously coaches and players.
Right.
And if you ever listen to a former player talk about their coach, it's never, well, he taught me how to shoot a basketball.
No.
He taught me how to dribble. He taught me how to run this play. He taught me how to pass the ball better, and he taught me how to do this.
Right.
It's always, he taught me about life. He taught me about
exactly right.
Of being a man or being a woman, being somebody and everything. You listen to Hall of Fame speech after Hall of Fame speech after recognition speech.
That's right.
And every one of them has a coach throughout their career that they say, I can't remember anything he taught me about my sport, but what I remember him teaching me was life is more than sports.
Right.
And he taught me how to deal with this life situation. And when something happened, when my best friend died or my mom died or somebody, I thought back and thought, man, I remember when he taught me how to deal with this situation. And like you said, you got Michael Jordan, Kobe, Phil Jackson was the greatest basketball coach probably of all time.
Yep.
And then take it back to John Wooden at UCLA, one
That's
of the
right,
greatest
that's right.
examples I've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah.
Of UC, he obviously was the greatest college coach of ever. You know,
Yep.
they won like 12 championships in a row.
I read a book about him. That was an incredible book.
And the best thing I've ever heard about him was they said he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Right.
He had, you know, all these future NBA Hall of Famers.
Right.
The first day of practice every year, you know what he taught them how to do?
Yep.
He taught them how to put on their socks and how to put on their shoes.
That's right.
And then people say, well, that's crazy. And he said, if you don't put your socks on right and you don't put your shoes on right, you're going to get blisters on your feet.
Yep.
And then,
Yep.
I mean, back then you weren't getting a $300 pair of Nikes.
That's
that
exactly
were,
right.
You know, but they said, then your feet are going to be messed up. And if your feet are messed up, you can't run down the court. If you can't run down the court, you can't shoot the basketball.
Yep.
So he started with the basics. And I'll tell you, of all the things that I've ever read about him and heard about him, I've never heard anybody say, and he was probably, I mean, he's credited with a lot of things in basketball that are rules and that are things that are done today because of stuff he did.
That's right.
But I've never heard a player talk about, yeah, he was instrumental in teaching me how to shoot a jump shot. No, he was instrumental in teaching me how to approach life.
Right.
And that's where, as the church, we failed because we're not teaching these kids, and we're not teaching our church members, and we're not teaching our friends, and we're not teaching our things how to be a better Christian. And that's the whole point of the church.
Right.
That's the whole point of you being a youth pastor is to, like you said, I promise you, there's very few, and I mean, I grew up in the church capital of the world. Like I said, multiple churches with thousands of members.
Right.
Multiple churches with preachers that are on the short list of some of the greatest preachers preaching right now.
Right.
And in all denominations.
Right.
Methodist,
Right.
Baptist, Church of God. I mean, this Church of God national headquarters is in my hometown. One of the top 5 Southern Baptist churches in America is in my hometown. And I mean, there's multiple preachers on all these staffs, and I've heard thousands of sermons preached by some of the greatest pastors in the whole world. And I bet if you said your life's on the line, tell me 10 sermons that you remember, I would say, well, you know what? It's time to go on because I mean, I remember bits and pieces, and I remember all the Bible stories, and I've heard all the stories. But to sit there and say, I remember the exact sermon that was, I bet you could ask 80% of the people that were in church in Bethesda this morning, what was the sermon about?
Right.
And
they could give you some.
They could give you the things, but what they can't, and the things. But I say all that to say the things that I do remember out of these sermons were the little lessons that, hey, when you get in this situation and when life gets you down, this is how you deal with it.
That's right.
Not like whatever the scripture was and whatever the point 1 through 10 was,
right?
The bullet points, but hey,
right.
I'm gonna give you the secret to life. You know, that kind of thing. Those are the things you remember. Those are the things that people take from you and take when Apollo. I mean, when Aquila and Priscilla were discipling Apollo, they weren't giving him these. If you want to preach a sermon a great way, you've got to start with this outline, and you've got to start with this. No. And you said it over and over again, and you say it almost in here every Wednesday night. If you really want to reach somebody, you got to love on them.
Right. That's exactly right.
And I think as disciples and churches and disciple people and being these unsung heroes, if you notice in all these stories, a lot of these stories deal with them finding somebody to love on and spend the time with to make something happen.
That's exactly right.
And that's exactly what Aquila and Priscilla did. They found Apollos and they loved on him, and they taught him how to preach and how to the full story of Christ.
That's exactly
right. They took the time. I mean, it really says in right here they took the time. They pulled him aside, and that's one thing that shows that they didn't get up and preach to him.
Right.
Like, you're wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. They pulled him to the side and said, look, we love you enough to, and I think as a church, as people that have an audience, that's something we have to do better with, of pulling people aside, loving on them, discipling them, teaching them about Christ's love and teaching them about things that can help them in the long run become better Christians. Mm-hmm. And the church, we get so focused on numbers sometimes of we gotta bring in 100 people, or we gotta get 2,000 people saved, and we gotta have X amount of decisions for Christ, because that's what it's all about. It's all about the growth of the kingdom, and that is a lot of what it is about. Right. But once you get to that point,
now what?
Yeah. That kind of thing. And so we are in the now what phase now. Right. I think. As a church, because especially in America, what is it? Certain percentage, 3/4 of the people identify themselves as church people.
Right.
And I mean, we all know that's, but to get that, you go to a bar on Friday night. Yeah. There's more people there than there is on Sunday morning.
Absolutely.
Saturday nights are full, and I mean, I've been down that road. Saturday nights are. Bars are full, and Sunday morning the pews are empty.
Right.
And so that's not a we need a better program, we need a better preacher, we need a better this to get people in. No, we need to love on people and disciple people to say, hey man, we got something over here that's better than that over there.
Right.
So that kind of thing. And so really I hope as we kind of draw this to a close, this whole series, and I said it last week, I really hope that you guys take the time, go back, read the verses for yourself.
Right.
Like we've always said with these things we do, don't distrust us. Read the verses for yourself. Read through Acts. Read through the life of Paul. You want to really get an in-depth Bible study, study the life of Paul. But instead of studying the life of Paul to emulate Paul, study the life of Paul and figure out the secondary people.
Where do I fit?
Life.
That's right.
Now, you may be the Paul.
That's right.
I mean, somebody's got to be Paul.
That's right.
But there's a whole lot better chance that you're Aquila and Priscilla than you are Paul.
That's right.
And so really focus on what you can do to help Paul, to help your pastor, to help your youth pastor, to help children's, to help these people that are in these positions. Okay, if you want a real life application, you want to know something that you can help Neil do as a youth in this church, you can help him disciple the people that he can never get in touch with.
That's exactly right.
There's 4,000 kids at Sumter High School. How many of those kids do you see on a daily basis? One, Walker.
That's exactly right.
No, I'm saying, But I mean, even with you helping with the football team, you helping with the FCA, you being around the school, you're still limited to a couple hundred kids.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So you want to help your youth pastor out. You want to help your youth group. You want to help the church. You've got. I mean, if you sit in here, take Walker for example, because I know Walker, and I'm not picking on anybody else. Take Walker for example. If Walker wasn't your son, Walker comes to youth group on Wednesday night. You're teaching this, teaching that. You go to football practice, you see Walker at football practice, he's around another 80 kids. Yep. So there's 80 right there. But guess what? When Walker goes to school Monday through Friday, which they're fixing to start school back up and that kind of stuff, so as they're going back to school, Walker's around another 1,000 kids.
That's right. That circle grows quick.
You have no connection whatsoever to.
Right.
You wouldn't even know them if the kid walked by you in the Walmart. Exactly you would have no idea that they even went to Sumter High School.
Right.
But Walker sees that kid.
Yep.
That kind of thing. And I'm not picking on Walker saying he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, because I know Walker, and even though he dresses like an old grandpa on playing golf, I'm picking at you, Walker. But no, seriously, he I know how he is, and I know how he is around people.
Right.
And so, but he has a whole different influence that you'll never have.
That's exactly right.
Every other child, there was 50 kids in here Wednesday night, 54, 55, something like that, round number, say 50 kids. Those 50 kids, if they only had, you had influence on those 50 kids, if they only were around 100 extra kids, that's 5,000 kids.
Yeah.
5,000 people that you will never have access to that those 50 kids have. So that's where, as youth leaders, as pastors, as churches, we have got to do a better job of teaching these people how to go out and be disciples.
That's right. That's right. I've got some homework for you. I want you to seriously do this. Grab you a notebook, and I want you to answer these questions. Do you have someone in your life who mentors or disciples you? And what do they bring into your life that you appreciate? Next question. Who is someone you admire because of their faith or Christian witness? How could you ask them to disciple you? And then the third question. What are things you know that you could pass on to others? How can you invest in someone this week? I want you to answer those. These are some very, very good questions that you've got to have the answers to in your life. Yeah. Who is someone in your life who mentors or disciples you, and what do they bring into your life that you appreciate? Who is someone you admire because of their faith or Christian witness, and how could you ask them to disciple you? What are things you know that you can pass on to others, and how can you invest in someone this week? Always someone you can invest in.
Absolutely.
I mean, when I say invest, it could be a smile at a store and just say, hey, look nice today. Or you see somebody struggling, or you can tell they're having a bad day, to say, hey, Jesus loves you. You have no idea at what that means for the encouragement part. So I'm challenging you this week. Answer these questions. Write them down. Keep them there. Also, make sure you're here Wednesday night, 7 o'clock for Haunted House. Can't wait to see you. Also, if you're not doing anything in the morning, about 9:15, 9:30, we're going to meet at the church, and there's a few of us are going to pass out some food boxes tomorrow to some of our shut-in and to some of our elderly. Great chance for you to serve. Now, don't you cut school.
Yeah, if
you come up here, well, Mom, I got to go do this for Jesus. Don't pull that card. So if you got school or stuff going on, we fully understand. But if you're not, please make sure that you're here in the morning for that kind of thing. I love you so much. I'm glad you tuned in tonight. I can't wait to see you guys in the room Wednesday. Let's pray and we'll close. Father, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you because of the people you've placed in our life who have discipled, mentored us, who've encouraged us, and who have loved on us. God, I pray that you'd help us to pay that forward. God, I pray for every person that has tuned in tonight for blessings and for an opportunity to make a difference. God, I thank you for Eric and Jimmy, who's here faithfully on Sundays and Wednesdays to make all this work, and for the sacrifice that they put in. God, I pray that you'd honor that in them. Lord, I pray for our community that we live in, that we do our part to share the hope of Jesus Christ, and not just leave them there, but to love on them and to disciple and to mentor to the best of our ability. God, we love you. We thank you for all things. It's in your name we live and we pray. Amen. God bless you.